There is no safe level of lead.
I am declaring a state of emergency for the incorporated boundaries of the city of Flint, Michigan.
This was probably our worst nightmare.
I'm sorry, government failed you.
For 2 years, the people of Flint have been lied to, mistreated, and stripped of one of their most basic human needs.
In our first documentary, we broke down the process of how Flint came to what it is today. After its release, the story unfolded further, including the release of government emails, scandals, and increased support from people around the world. It's important to remember that the reason people have been suffering for the last 2 years was based on a single decision that was meant to save money. Jordan Hancock will recap on the past 2 years.
Flint's economy was at an all-time high, but people began leaving and taking their money elsewhere, which sent the city into a downward spiral of financial distress. Starting September of that same year, problems began to arise because of the switch to the river water. Finally, in October of 2015, Flint's Mayor Dane Walling announced the switch back to Detroit water, but that didn't stop the problem. TTHM, a byproduct of chlorine disinfecting of the Flint water, was found in alarming levels. Notices were sent out claiming that this was not at all an emergency. Lead in the pipes reacting with the corrosive chemicals in the water put traces of lead in the water. The residents of Flint did not have safe drinking water, children broke out in rashes when bathed, cooking was done with bottled water, and the bills were piling up for toxic water. It's been 2 years, and the water is still affecting the people today.
For months after the switch, nobody really knew the problems with the water. It all started with Leanne Walters, a mother of 4, who recognized the danger.
Making sure that people get the help that they need. That's still not happening here on the ground, and that is what is needed the most.
Kirk Ayette also became the first journalist to write about the water, sparking an explosion in media attention.
We were all interested in getting to the truth and all worked cooperatively, very cooperatively, in order to achieve that goal.
Alongside those two would be Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha from Hurley and Mark Edwards from Virginia Tech, who both worked to expose the lead contamination. Without these people, things could have been much worse.
The struggle wasn't just dealing with the lead. Next comes the testing. Endless pokes and prodding, results that take weeks to come back. Not knowing when the next water pickup is, and wondering if that filter needed to be changed. Restless nights wishing for less confusion. The system for getting tested was error-prone, and sometimes it was just ineffective. Haley Garrett has more on the lead testing process.
Testing the water in people's homes is what revealed everything. Worried families like Leanne Walters demanded that the city test their water to figure out what was going on. Regardless of the government's careless testing, the public was finally starting to be aware of the reality. There's lead in their water. Many families were just too late. Lead leaves the blood after about a month of being in the human body's system. It then moves to organs and bones in the body. This can cause many health problems, both mentally and physically. Once the lead leaves the blood, it is very difficult to test for the poison. On top of the scientific problems of testing residents, there's also the problem of lack of staff. There's only one technician testing all of these blood samples at the county health department.
Lead in the pipes of the city of Flint could be in a couple different places. It could be in the water service lines that start here at the roads and end up by the house. Or it could be in the water pipes and fixtures in the house itself. Both may need to be replaced.
Originally, the state response to the water crisis was quite slow until Rick Snyder, the governor of Michigan, announced that the state was at fault for what happened to Flint and said that he was taking responsibility for the crisis. Since then, Snyder has worked to fix the problem and send help, like the National Guard, into the community. Bailey Talaska has more on the state's response to the Flint water crisis.
The state dragged its feet for 7 months.
For that reason, the state of Michigan's government is taking the most heat for the Flint crisis. High lead levels and the growing amount of cases in Legionnaires was known by the state before it became public. In March 2016, the state finally released a long-term plan for Flint. It includes getting more kids tested for lead poisoning and making sure all people have access to fresh food. In addition to this new plan, the state has also been working on getting funding for Flint.
The majority of the state response only came after months of screaming citizens, independent lead testing, and an explosion of media attention.
News outlets around the country rushed to Flint when they realized what was happening to the city. It wasn't long before the power of the media brought more than just worldwide attention. Suleiman Martarwe has the story.
For 2 years, the people's voices of Flint were crying out for someone to pay attention. Eventually, it happened. People like Rachel Maddow recognized the severity of the water problems and brought her show to Flint. Political activists showed up, like Reverend Jesse Jackson, who came to Flint multiple times and then led a march. Michael Moore also came, hoping to have Governor Snyder arrested and for President Obama to visit Flint. President Obama never came down to Flint, but he was only 60 miles away in Detroit at the height of the crisis. Although the president did not come down to Flint, but the presidential hopefuls did, hosting a debate at the White Auditorium. Now that people around the globe know about the problem, doesn't mean that it's fixed.
Due to all of the coverage, the federal government began talks about aiding Flint.
Many people are beginning to ask for a change in the lead and copper rule. It has been shown that the rule was part of the reason for the crisis. Savannah Rowe and Robin Porter have more on what the federal government is and isn't doing about the crisis.
The federal response to the Flint water crisis started off slow, but it picked up when the president came to Detroit on January 16th.
Many of the high-ranking members in different agencies that we once believed were there to help us actually made the problem worse.
Haley Thompson has the rundown on those people who lost their jobs since the water emergency began.
After many government mistakes in the Flint water crisis, it was only a matter of time before people started losing their jobs. The first to feel the heat of the crisis was Flint Mayor Dane Walling. He lost his re-election in early November to Karen Weaver. Next in the hot seat was the DEQ, but the first to actually be fired over the water was former DEQ's head of Michigan's drinking water unit, Leanne Shecker-Smith. She knew early on about the contaminants in the water, but made no action to fix the ongoing problem. Former EPA Region 5 Administrator Suzanne Hedman resigned after strong criticism for withholding Flint lead concerns.
Investigations are appearing all the time, and even more are coming. Not only will these investigations hinder the city, but they will also hinder the state. Kelvin Phillips and Abby O'Neill shine the light on this story.
The Flint water crisis has ruined many people's lives and caused families a lot of pain. And now investigations and lawsuits have started to pile up, and people are hoping to be brought the answers and justice that they deserve. The Flint Water Task Force, created by Governor Snyder, are the first to finish their investigation in Flint in March of this year. The task force found that the MDEQ and former emergency managers of Flint are mostly to blame for this catastrophe. The government, for the people of Flint, and the EPA are also at fault. But while there are many people investigating and lawsuits are mounting up, some people in Flint still don't have water. This is a big problem that has not gone away overnight.
At this point, local, state, and federal agencies take blame for the crisis. But they're also taking heat for what's happening beneath the surface and behind closed doors. Did they know that people were being poisoned earlier? And did they fail to act in time? Grant Palmentier and Jillian Berger tell us more.
One of the most disturbing parts of the Flint story is that it took outside experts, discredited whistleblowers, and emails to expose the total failure of government that created the Flint water crisis. There's a lot to this story, but let's begin with the Flint mother. Her name is Leanne Walters. Leanne said that she asked Miguel Del Toro to come to her home, where he found high elevations of lead within her water. She then went on to say that he was silenced, and the EPA denied they had silenced Del Toro. Other concerns raised about the initial testing were the city only collected 71 results when they needed 100 for a city of 100,000. Then, the state officials threw out 2 test results that pushed lead results under the 15 parts per billion requirement. And on top of all this, testers were flushing the water lines before taking test samples. While the city was at fault, the EPA has seen just as much of the blame towards covering Flint up. The EPA not only had silenced Del Toro, but they are at fault for not acting sooner with well-known knowledge. At the State of the State address on January 19, 2016, Governor Snyder announced he'd release emails from his staff between 2014 and 2015. In these emails is where it gets even worse. Much of Snyder's staff, including his chief of staff, knew very well of the catastrophe at hand, whether it was the TTHM or lead and now Legionnaires. Is the state government truly that incompetent? Is the governor lying? Unfortunately, we don't know that. There are several simultaneous investigations being conducted by federal and state government with no conclusions as of yet.
The emails released, the silenced EPA official, and the overall lack of acknowledgement among all parties in wrongdoing point to this Flint water crisis as not just a mishap, but a full-fledged cover-up.